Welcome everyone, my name is Brendan Snyder. Thank you for joining me. This is Top 5 Glam Metal Albums of 1992, but this time it is the Obscure and Rare edition. So we got the Top 5 Obscure Glam Metal Bands of 1992. Now, these artists, whether we call them glam metal, hair bands, whatever the title you want to use for it, these great artists, they ran under the radar at the time, but yet stood against the changing musical climate that was going on, being the grunge, the alternative. And while they didn't scale any big heights, they still gave us some of what I think are the best albums of that genre and era. Now, before we go any further, if you're new to my channel and you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please click the button. Also leave a comment, hit like, all those things help support my channel. I would greatly appreciate it. And if you enjoyed this video or know someone that would, please share it, help get the word out that way as well. And of course, as I always say, by subscribing, you'll be able to stay up to date on all that's going on in the world of music, just like this with Top 5 Glam Metal Albums of 1992, the Obscure and Rare edition. Now, before we get started here though, I did do a separate video for the best glam metal albums of 1992 with all the big names, and you can see some of them scattered around behind me here in the display. I'll put a link to that in the description below and you can check that one out. But remember, this one here is about obscure and rare bands, the ones that flew under the radar. Now, I've also got 3 honorable mentions that I want to do here. First one up being Slick Toxic and their album Doing the Nasty. This one here was their debut album, although they did have an EP that came out in 1991 called Smooth and Deadly. They are a Canadian band. They formed in 1988 and featured Nick Walsh on vocals, who would go on to front 70s classic rockers Moxie. He has recorded with them too, their last album, and Neil Busby on guitar, who toured in 70s classic rockers April Wine. So these guys have gone on to do some other things. They did record a follow-up in 1994 called Irrelevant, and Nick Walsh has another band called Famous Underground that he does. Some really good hard rock. I recommend checking it out if you like his vocals. All right, the next honorable mention is Roxy Blue and Want Some. This one here is produced by Mike Klink, of course, of GNR fame. Very hook-laden pop metal with sort of Van Halen type flair to the guitar that's in here. In 2013, F&A Records, which is a really good label that releases unreleased material. It's not really a reissue label because a lot of cases this stuff has never been out. But they released 3 archival albums of material for this band. Want Some More, which were demos for a proposed second album. Stripped, which is an unplugged album, and Live at Night Moves, of course, as it states, it's a live album. Now, in 2019, though, the band released their first brand new album of all new studio material in 27 years. It's a self-titled album. It's a different sound, a more modernized sound than, the 1992 Want Some album, but it's great to have them back, and I do recommend checking it out if you're a fan of the original. All right, and the third and final honorable mention goes to Heavy Bones. This release, self-titled, they were kind of almost a supergroup at the time. Joel Ellis was on vocals. He comes from the band Cats in Boots. Frankie Banali on drums, of course, coming from Quiet Riot, but also Wasp and Blackthorn, to name just a few, because he's been around. They had Gary Hoey on guitar. Virtuoso had a solo album out prior to this, but really great 1993 album from him called Animal Instinct came out with probably his biggest song, which is a cover of the song Hocus Pocus by the band Focus. Played all around, and if you watched Headbangers Ball at the time, he was like the in-house guitarist and would play at different events and things that they had. So a lot of recognition at the time. And on bass was Rex Tennyson. So the band itself, just a dirty, sleazy vocal over melodic hard rock, sort of like Sea Hags meet Hardline. that helps, let you know what this sounded like. Now, the album itself has recently been reissued on Bad Reputation Records. They're doing a lot of really great reissues, so you can get this great album here again. It is back in print, and it was their only album. Okay, now starting off on our top 5 countdown of the best glam metal albums of 1992, the obscure and rare edition of this. Coming in at number 5, we've got T-Ride, debut album and only one by them. A wildly complex instrumentation and vocal arrangements by this band. Imagine Queen meets Van Halen, and that would give you a good idea of what these guys sound like. At the time, Joe Satriani endorsed the band and was a big fan of theirs. They appeared on 3 soundtracks at the time, Encino Man in 1992, as well as Captain Ron 1992, and then they appeared in an episode, or the music did, of Baywatch, Forbidden Paradise Part 2. So they were, had their music around. It was in things. It was on radio. MTV was playing their stuff. For whatever reason, it just didn't catch on, and they really ran under the radar. Eric Valentine, their drummer, he went on to be quite a notable producer, worked with Smash Mouth, Queens of the Stone Age, and Third Eye Blind, just to name a few. All right, coming in at number 4, we've got Bangalore Choir on Target. This is the original album cover of it. I don't know, they later deemed this to be too risque, and they removed the girl from it. But that's the original one there. Formed in 1991 by former Accept vocalist David Reese. He replaced Udo in the band Accept, and they recorded the Eat the Heat album, this one here, 1989. But when the band folded, he then formed Bangalore Choir. The band also featured Ian Mayo on bass, as well as Jackie Ramos, and both of those guys come from Hurricane Alice. Now, the spelling of this is a strange way because they couldn't use the name Hurricane because the other band that existed at that time called that. So they spelled it H-E-R, like as in a girl, her, Hurricane Alice. It makes sense, but I always felt that made it hard to, to track it down, kind of a thing. Really great band, though. If you don't know Hurricane Alice, do check them out. It was produced by Max Norman, famed for having worked with Megadeth, of course, and it featured a lot of co-writes with Bon Jovi and Aldo Novas, so you got some big names in there, and the sound of this was classic, big, catchy, over-the-top glam metal, sort of sound of the time. It's what it was. Later, though, Ian and Jackie go on to join Bad Moon Rising with Doug Aldridge. So a lot of these guys, stayed in the limelight and stuff like that. And you have David Reese, who remained active in many different groups, even doing solo work. So you can find him out there as well. All right, coming in at number 3, we've got Rockhead, self-titled release for this band, a debut album only. Formed by famous producer Bob Rock, and that's where the title comes from, Rockhead, Bob Rock. He formed it in 1991. Now, of course, he's famous for having worked with Motley Crue, Metallica, Bon Jovi, among many others, currently working with The Offspring. But he had been in 2 previous bands, Payolas and Rock and Hide. Very different sounds, much more of the 80s style, sort of 80s new wave, pop sort of sounding. But for this band, he plays guitar in it, and the vocals were handled by an unknown but amazing singer, Steve Jack. Always wanted to know more about this guy or hear more from him, but I've never found any more info on him. May have been all he did. But you can imagine with a name like Bob Rock involved in a band, you're going to get some really big name guest artists and co-writes, and he did that from Bon Jovi members, The Cult, and Little Caesar, all bands he worked with and produced. Now, he went out on the road and he toured this group, opening for Bon Jovi, but unfortunately the album just faded without a trace, didn't do anything, and so of course Bob Rock returns to producing, and next up for him was Bon Jovi's Keep the Faith from '93, and of course Motley Crue's self-titled album 1994, which I feel is excellent, even though it gets a lot of flack for not having Vince Neil on it. Okay, coming in at number 2, we've got War Babies. Debut album, only one from them, formed in 1988 by former TKO vocalist Brad Sinself. Fantastic vocals from him. Really wish he would do more. The band also featured drummer Richard Stuyvesant, and I apologize if I'm pronouncing that wrong, Stuyvesant. I'm probably never going to get that right. He played with the Seattle punk band, the Fastbacks. That's why I wanted to mention his name. Brad and Richard also played together in a very short-lived group called Suicide Squad. They did make one album together. The debut single off of this album here, called Hang Me Up, was co-written by Paul Stanley of Kiss. So, I mean, I knew I loved that song, but I only just found that out because they write P. Stanley, and I never really put that together that it was Paul from Kiss. I just assumed it was some other guy. But found that out today, really excited about that. But of course, that just explains why I really, really like that song and single that was off it. Just, you know, big vocals, amazing guitars, fantastic production. But the album didn't make any impression, and unfortunately, the band broke up with it. Richard went on to join Three Fish, and Three Fish is Pearl Jam's Jeff Ament. It's his side project. So Richard's done some other things, but he's kind of been the most notable person to have come out of the group and continue to go on and do other things. All right, and coming in at number one, what I consider the number one, top glam metal band of 1992 that ran under the radar, Wild Side and Under the Influence. Absolutely fantastic album by these guys. Debut album, formed in 1988, originally under the name Young Guns. But of course, due to the movie that was filming at the time, also called Young Guns with Emilio Estevez in it, they had to change their name. Now, this album here is produced by legendary producer Andy Johns, who worked with Led Zeppelin. And then, as I said, in my opinion, this is just one of the best glam metal albums of all time, bar none. It is just that good. An absolute mystery as to why it didn't catch on, except for the time frame it was released in 1992, maybe just a little too late for that sound. But opening track, Hang On Lucy, is just a classic sleazy, dirty guitar glam metal, sound at its best. Guitarist Brent Woods would actually leave the band and go on to join Vince Neil's solo band after he left Motley Crue or was kicked out, depending upon which side of the story you listen to. But he goes on to join Vince Neil's solo band, and vocalist Drew Hanna continues the band, and they do put out one more album, a follow-up. But like many bands of the day, they tried to change with the times. They took on a more grunge sound, and that didn't work either for them, unfortunately. Since that time, though, F&A Records again has put out an archival release of demos being called simply formerly known as Young Guns, so that they could get that out there, because that's what they were known as when they did it. But the quality of this is really quite good and amazing. I do recommend it. If you like the debut album, check this out. There's a number of really great things on there. And of course, this album here has been reissued by Bad Reputation Records. So once again, it is in print after years of not being available. It's available again. All right, so there you go, guys. The top 5 glam metal albums of 1992. Yet this is the obscure and rare edition. I hope you enjoyed the top 5 that I gave you, plus the 3 honorable mentions. 8 really great glam metal bands that ran under the radar. And yes, you can call these bands whatever you want: glam metal, hair metal, hard rock, melodic rock. I don't care. I'm calling it glam metal. There you go. Top bands. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Please leave your comments. Let me know your thoughts. And again, check the links in the description below. I'm also going to put a link in there for this album, which I have reviewed. So you'll get a little Wild Side in there along with the other top albums of 91, 92, and so forth. Again, hope you guys enjoyed this. Take care. Have a great day, and I'll talk to y'all real soon. Bye, everyone.